Tommy Walsh on the line. Tommy, good morning to you. How you doing?
Good morning, Jared. Good morning, lads.
Hey, the Hurling Warriors behind you there. Who have we got? Christy Ring, Nicky English, and who's the third one?
Yeah, well, you were mentioning maybe you might want to ask about full back play. So I said I'd hope the best full forward probably to play the game. You have the king himself down here. Can you see him? You have Nicky English, Tipperary, Christy Ring, and you have Jimmy Barry Murphy.
JBM. So, we can't actually see Henry, but I presume it's Henry, is it?
Yeah, that's Henry down in the corner. So we said with Christy full forward, we said we put Henry into the corner.
Well, look, it's Shane's theory, and we may as well start with it. That at the moment, you explain it.
I think full-back is getting to the stage where it's the most important position on the field. I mean, it was always crucial because, you know, you're there to protect the square. But in the olden days, we know it was the big, burly full-back and just a couple of quick cornerbacks around him. Whereas now, I think it's possibly the most athletically demanding position on the field because you're going to be isolated in 20, 30 yards of space, and you've got to have a full-back who can survive on his own. And I think there's a couple of big examples that kind of highlighted that. I think Joey Holden in the 2016 All-Ireland against Tipperary with Seamus Callan, it was just oceans of space around him, and very few could survive at that. And straight away, Brian Cody's answer was to put Pádraig Walsh, Tommy's brother, who's possibly, along with Cillian Buckley, maybe the best athlete in that Kilkenny panel. They've put him in there because he can probably survive on his own. He's got the pace, which we saw with that fantastic point he scored against Cork coming from full-back. I mean, unbelievable pace. He's brilliant in the air and he's hardy. Daithí Burke is another perfect example because Galway had a lot of trouble with, again, Seamus Callan, and this isn't a Seamus Callan kind of, it didn't just come from him alone. But he was then put into full-back, Daithí Burke was, and it solved the problem, and Galway to go on to win an All-Ireland. So you look at teams around the country, Liam Ryan, unbelievably full-back, a fast full-back for Kilkenny or Wexford as well. And I think it's an issue that a lot of counties are going to come up against this year. Do you either play a sweeper in front of your full-back, or do you pick someone who's athletically at the very top end? And I think that's something that Tipperary are gonna have a difficulty with this year because last year James Barry was left isolated at times when he was full-back, and it was really, really difficult, and I think his confidence probably suffered from it. Tomás Hamill is playing there at the moment, and I believe in the past couple of years he would have been absolutely fantastic in training. But if you're 6'4", 6'5", and you're playing full-back and you're isolated with 30 yards around you and there's a lovely ball popping in front of a fast full forward,
you're screwed.
You're in serious trouble.
Yeah.
And that's why I have a kind of a theory with Tipperary that who's the guy that they can pick that's athletically an animal and that could possibly survive in there. And he scored 2-9 for Tipperary at the weekend against Kilkenny, Michael Breen, but he was the best full-back coming through from Tip underage in the past number of years when he was under 21 a couple of years ago. So I got a bit of slagging for tweeting that I think he should be the full-back, and then he goes on to score like that. But I don't think it suits his attributes to play full forward. And I think Tip's their need at full-back is great because of how full-backs have to operate now.
Okay, well, there's a lot in that. We can unpack the Michael Breen thing in a moment. But Tommy, first, give us your thoughts on the notion that it is the most athletically demanding position, the way most teams are playing now, unless, of course, you have a sweeper.
Yeah, Jared, I think I agree totally with Shane. I think it's the most difficult position on the field, and I always maintain that even when I was hurling myself. Like, while it's the most difficult, it can also be the most inspirational. Like, you go back and look at all the teams that have won All-Ireland finals. Like, they become the crowd favourite quite easily because they're usually these big iconic type figures. Like, go back to the great Offaly team. You had Kevin Keenan, crowd loved him. You had Brian Lohan. Once Brian Lohan hit the ball, the whole crowd were on their feet. You had The Rock from Cork. Kilkenny had Noel Hickey. Crowd loved him. The team loved him. They're inspirational type figures. So while it is the most difficult position in the field, it's probably the most important because if you can get that right, it lays the foundation for your whole team. It could be your whole year. As Shane said a few minutes ago, Daithí Burke. I remember in Kilkenny club hurling back when my father was hurling back in the 90s. There was this Dixborough, Cillian Buckley, they won the county final this year, but they had a good young team back then. But that this full-back, Murch Marnell was his name. Even the name is inspirational. He was... I'd say he was, I don't want to, I suppose, maybe say his age, but I'd say he was close 35, 40 at the time. But he was a stopper. He was in there and nothing got past him. You know, your dandy corner forwards, like PJ Delaney was a great forward at the time for Johnstown, JJ Delaney's club. but he wouldn't get past the merch because the merch stopped everyone, and that's the way it felt. And so I agree with Shane. It's the most difficult position in the field. Why? If you're a cornerback, take Paul Murphy, Cottle Barrett, for example. They come bursting out in front. If they make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. The ball can go wide, or there's a full back there maybe to cover, or a wing back maybe covering back. When you're full back, you can't always be in front. So, say if your man gets around you, it's a goal usually. So you nearly have to be a stopper. And that's why, I suppose, even with Waterford, that's why I think they can go on and win in All-Ireland with 6 backs, because I think Barry Coughlin is one of the best full backs in the game at the moment, because he's a stopper. He mightn't clear 100 balls, but he'll stop guys getting in and getting goals. Like I was looking at, you'll think I'm probably mad now at the moment, but I was looking at a form a guy gave me a few years ago, a player's guide to hurling. I think it's back from the 70s, or says here rule changes approved by Congress in 1974, so it must be the 70s or 80s. But it gives the function of a full back, Ger. And it says, well, to tell you how long ago, one of their functions was to organise the back line for semi-penalties, so that wasn't fair yesterday. But how times have changed, but what really changes at the end of the day, their motto, like the goalkeepers, should be safety first. Their main aim is to get the ball out of the danger area as quickly as possible. Close marking is absolutely essential, making sure to be at the safe side, which is between the forward and the goal. You go to JJ Delaney, Ger, when he was in our team. JJ could have cleared probably 10, 15, 20 more balls every game. But because he was full-back in his later years, he had to adopt that safety-first approach. So as well as being excellent athletically, you have to be, I suppose, have a great head, that sometimes you can't play for yourself, you have to play for the team, and you have to adopt that safety first approach. There is a lot in it, I know, Ger, but most difficult position in the field.
It feels a bit like JJ was the original solution to this issue, that he was one of the most athletically gifted players on the team, but also did have that kind of sense of ability to read the game. And essentially, Brian Cody's done something fairly similar with Porrick, moving him back full back. It's like, here's somebody I trust who I know is a brilliant hurler, and he'll bring the attributes of the hurler and the athleticism to the full back position.
Yeah, that's right. And now the thing with it is, like the question we have to ask, why are they playing Porrick full back? And I think it just goes back to experience. And Brian Cody was there when Seamus Callan scored, was it 2-8 or whatever he scored in the All-Ireland finals, a big score. Shane probably knows.
13 points, 9 from play.
Yeah, 9 points from play. So basically, I think Brian Cody, that he's thinking of the big day, and he's thinking that when it comes down to it, possibly it could be a 15 versus 15, I suppose, traditional style game when you get to that stage, and he will need Porrick there full back just to I suppose sturdy up the ship. But it's a different game. It depends on whether they're playing the traditional way or whether they're playing versus a sweeper. If you're playing versus a sweeper, I don't think it's a big issue, because there'll usually be only 2 guys in there with a sweeper. But if it's 15 versus 15, Ger, I think it's very important that your full back is right.
We're probably going to end up talking about Wexford and Kilkenny shortly, and it's just, if you look back at the Leinster semi-final that they had last year, Colin Fennelly was isolated in full forward, and there actually was Liam Ryan man-marking him, and you had Sean Murphy sweeping as well, and they couldn't handle him, because I'd say Tommy would probably agree that Colin Fennelly is arguably the best athlete in the whole game. So if any team is going to isolate a weakness that you have back there, even 2 men, on this occasion, I believe he won a penalty. There was yellow cards for both Liam Ryan and Sean Murphy.
They stopped feeding him at one point for about 20 minutes. Yeah. They didn't give him the ball. Like, what are you doing? Just give him the ball. He's killing them. And
that's the problem. So if on your team you have someone who's athletically as imposing as Colin Fennelly, why wouldn't you try to feed him time after time after time? And I think that's a feature of hurling these days. Another kind of interesting side note on that, like Owen O'Donnell is another guy who came through for Dublin last year. Now at the moment, obviously they're struggling badly, down a lot of players, but he's a guy who's able to survive on his own. He cleaned off Seamus Callan in a league game, even though Dublin lost by 18 points last year. Liam Ryan, I think there was a game recently against Cork, and he kept overlapping his man and finding himself, even though he started midfield, started full back, kept finding himself in midfield. So I think that might be part of Davies' game plan, maybe, that anyone can attack from anywhere to some degree, especially when you have sweeper.
And that would be the evolution of the sweeper system. Is like, instead of you just sitting back there, that actually you push forward every opportunity you get.
Well, that's it now, like, because there are no stoppers anymore, and you're a stopper only. You have to be able to hurl every position. Now, maybe a forward can't play as a back and a back as a forward, but if you're in that middle eight, you got to be able to move through the different quarters, and if you're a back, you got to be able to play anywhere at the back. And just, I know you're going to jump in there, but just one other thing I noticed from a full back line, that Aaron Graffin scored 2 points from cornerback for Antrim against Dublin as well. So you see that this is kind of something, along with Pádraig Walsh scoring that great point, it's evolving the whole time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting though when you list off the calibre of player you're talking about here, and I think we've established so far that it is the most important position on the field. But it seems to me as well there's only about a dozen lads in the country who you'd be fully confident of playing in that full-back position without a sweeper in front of them to actually execute the role of a full-back close to perfectly. So I'm wondering, Tommy, is the sweeper the only way of actually protecting a weaker full-back? And I don't want to use the word weaker, basically anybody outside of those 10, 12 full-backs that are kind of in that top rung who can handle full-back on their own.
Yeah, well, Owen, I think it depends. Listen, if you have a great full back, it gives your team a much better chance of winning the All-Ireland. Like, you go back to, I suppose, we'll say we'll go on from the full back, but even the full back line is so important. Like, you look at the 2008 All-Ireland when we beat Waterford. Like, they talk about, I suppose, the collapse in the second half, but any team that scores, I think we got 2 goals in 2 minutes. Like, I suppose you go back to the question, Derek McGrath is always asking the question, why do we not analyse his sweeper system properly, maybe? And again, it goes back to the question, why are they playing with this sweeper system? Like, Waterford in 2008 Ireland conceded 2 goals in 2 minutes when they're already about a few points down. It was kind of game over. They played Limerick when they were just after beating Kilkenny in the league final 2007 on. And they were probably at the peak of their powers at that stage, and they were after beating Cork after a replay up in Croke Park in a quarter final. They met Limerick then in the semi-final, and everyone just presumed they were going to steamroll on to the All-Ireland final. They got caught by Limerick. They conceded, I think, 5 goals I think that day. So I think it's just so important that I don't really agree with the sweeper system, because I think when it comes to the crunch to win the All-Ireland, you're not going to win the All-Ireland with it, bar you're playing another team with a sweeper. I think you just have to find the best way. So, horses for courses. If you're playing, you mentioned Colin Fennelly, well, don't maybe put someone that will suit Colin Fennelly. You probably have to put a stopper on Colin Fennelly, someone that will concede maybe 2 or 3 points. You put a hurler on Colin Fennelly, suddenly he misses a ball, Colin Fennelly's gone around you, and it's a goal. So sometimes you're better off towards, if you have a big full forward, a big strong guy who is dependent on strength, well, then maybe put a guy there that can hurl away, because that guy probably is not going to do a whole lot of damage if he wins the ball anyway. He's just there to break it up. So I think, Owen, I would go away from the sweeper system, and I'd be thinking horses for courses, maybe change it around game to game.
Why do we think Derek McGrath persists with it then?
Well, I think it's going back to the past, and you look at all them great Waterford teams, like they were in, I'd say you could count all, like I'd say the 2 hands wouldn't be enough for the All-Ireland semi-finals these guys have played in. And I'd say goals have been an important issue in why they haven't went on to win the All-Ireland, as in conceding goals. So I think Derek McGrath said, well, listen, I'm going to go in here, I'm going to change up this, and I'm going to sort out this goal problem. That if they were thinking maybe if they had this sweeper system versus Limerick in 2007, they would have been in the All-Ireland final. Maybe against Kilkenny in that 2008 All-Ireland final, that 10 minutes where we dominate wouldn't have happened. It would have been a total different game. Few more games, I suppose. They played a lot of semi-finals. So I think Derek McGrath is I suppose, trying to learn from the past of Waterford. Like, he's a Waterford man, a staunch Waterford man. There's no one, I'd say, in Ireland would want to win an All-Ireland for Waterford more than Derek McGrath. We see that as in interviews. We see it last year, taking time off school, just totally dedicated to the cause. So I think that's why he's persistent with it, is because he's trying to learn from the past Waterford teams. But I don't agree with it,
He was on the show last night, and it does definitely sound like this is going to be his last year in charge. Have a look.
So you're back teaching, are you, for the year, or what's the plan?
No, I was back till January. I'm out now at the moment, Joe. Yeah, I'm back out again, so I can.
Right.
I'm I'm on parental leave at the moment, yeah.
And so, what do you want to say now before a headline kicks off that says McGrath forced to leave teaching again due to intercounty commitments? What's the point you want to make about it?
No, there was no. I had 14 weeks left on my youngest son, Owen, and look, I think I've told you already in terms of without making it a big deal, it's probably my last go at it, in terms of 2018. So I just said, 14 weeks, I'll give it, I in between that I have a midterm break, I have the 2 weeks Easter holidays, I have the last week in May, so it's only about a 10 week parental leave as such, and I just said I'd give it 10 weeks of absolute effort and get the balance right, more balance right in terms of spending a bit more time with the kids as opposed to the hurling, and that's not becoming that's obsessive with the hurling, but I think the prerequisite of parental leave is that you have 2 children, and that's why you're there to look after them as such, and I think I've been spending a little bit more time with them, trying to help a little bit more with them, if you like. But yeah.
Oh, seems to have had a bit of problem with the end of that, but I think you got the gist of it anyway. He's on parental leave. I think the obvious thing is that we had this sense that it was the last year of Derek McGrath. He's formally said it now. This is probably going to be my last go of it. I wonder if they win in All Ireland, does he stay on? I'm not sure.
You just wonder what will happen for Waterford after he leaves, because there's a huge void to fill there. Ever since the first year he came in, you could just sense how deeply he felt what they were doing. They've lost their relegation playoff to Dublin. I remember being in the dressing room with him, one of those cold, dank Walsh Park dressing rooms, and he just looked like a guy who was broken by the defeat. Broken-hearted, I should say, not broken by it. And just going down to different press conferences with him, the way he's just the ultimate hurling nerd. He's going on about a match that happened 20 years ago, and he can tell you exactly what a guy scored. And he started talking about some player's stats, and he scored 5 points in one game, 3-4 in the next, or whatever. And you just wonder who is going to be able to take this on, because a lot of people within Waterford don't even agree with what he's doing in terms of the sweeper. Now, I completely see why. It's not, in my opinion, it's not because he doesn't trust the backs, it's because he doesn't have the forwards. If you think back over the years with the John Mallah and Owen Kelly and all Dan Shanna and all these different types of guys, these lads could all put up a fair old score on their own.
Yeah.
Whereas now he's had to put, I said this before, he's had to put Brick up in the forwards to be a ball winner. He's had to move Austin Gleeson up the field, who we know can be unbelievable. Pádraig Mahony's there, but he doesn't have too many stellar forwards after that. So I think you've got to shore up the back and hope that you can use that midfield. Everyone from midfield forward is a scorer after that.
Does it matter to them if they end up in a relegation playoff, or do they need a quarter final where they actually have another meaningful game? Like, the confidence from the victory in Cork is huge for them. Do they need a few quick wins here?
Well, I was thinking a lot about it last night because I had a feeling this would come up, and I think, there's always this talk that league is league, and that's fine unless you have a particularly bad ending to it. If things go very badly, then it sets you up very poorly for the summer. Like, you think of Tipperary last year, they got hockeyed by Galway in the semi-final, and all of a sudden it took them a long time to get right. They lost to Cork in the Munster Championship. You think of Clare in 2013 when they won the All-Ireland. They went into relegation.
Do you think of Galway last year, getting hammered by what was the B team that Waterford put out in the quarterfinals, and then they recover from that and they don't get beaten again for the rest of the year?
Yeah, and there's something like 10 wins in a row ever since. You think Limerick last year, they probably felt like in John Kiley's first year, they're building up to a nice year, then they get hammered at home by Galway in the league semi-final, and then their year it's poor. And it'll be important for Limerick to beat Galway this weekend, in the way that it's not particularly important for Tipperary or Kilkenny to win the league, but to just come through with players and not to all of a sudden have confidence broken. I think it's just to survive the league for a lot of teams.
Just a quick one on McGrath for Tommy before we get into kind of this weekend's games. When it comes to Derek McGrath, we all know how important he is, but I don't think it's until he'll leave that we realise just how important he is. That there's almost an argument to be made that when you look at the likes of Brian Cody at Kilkenny, that he's created such a culture there that success could prevail for a few years afterwards. Whereas in Waterford, it does feel very kind of centred on Derek McGrath, that if he leaves, the culture might, to a certain extent, fall apart.
Yeah, it's a good point to make. I think on he's the ultimate leader, really, as regards dedication to the cause. And I suppose talk is cheap. It's all about actions. Well, Derek McGrath, does the actions. Like, when he says he's committed, he is committed, and we can see that by everything he does. Why is he taking time off work? He said it exactly. I know myself with 2 kids, what the story is in regards to spending time with them. So I think no matter what happened, whether he was working or not working, he was going to spend this amount of time preparing this Waterford team. Why did he take the parental leave? He said it exactly there, I think, to spend more time with his kids. So he can do both now. Like we see with all the managers now, like there's a lot of teachers, so they're kind of professional managers really for the summer months. And Derek McGrath just wants to do that because it's his last year now for the next probably 6 or 8 months or whatever is left in the season. But I think what he has said, like the most important thing we hear in any sports, like the New Zealand rugby players, it's all about culture. The Irish rugby situation at the moment under Joe Smith, it's all about culture, setting standards. Well, I think when you're doing that, you're looking to the future. And I think he's after setting a standard and a culture of what has to be done to be an inter-county player. Systems and tactics, that will all change. We don't have to worry about that. But if the culture is set right, I think you're onto a winner. And I think that's why Derek McGrath is a winner for Waterford Hurling. Waterford Hurling people, while they'll agree or disagree with his tactics, we can all fall out for a short while over things like that. But as regards the long-term view for Waterford, he's a great man because he's after setting the standard that whether he finishes up this year or next year or whenever, it will be left in a good place. What do all the great teams now at the moment say? We want to leave the jersey in a better place when I'm gone. This is not about me, it's a team game. Well, I think that's what will happen when Derek McGrath does go, whenever it is, that it'll be just left in a better place and the young players will bring it on to the next level.
Yeah, it's up to Austin Gleeson and Jamie Barron and Pádraig Mahoney and those guys to make sure that culture persists into the future. I do want to ask you about the League is League point as well, because there's a sense that there's a little bit more riding on the game between Wexford and Kilkenny this time than there would be, perhaps by virtue of the fact that the Walsh Cup ended the way it did and there was a bit of animation on the sideline between the two managers and a bit of stuff afterwards in the press. I mean, maybe we just enjoy that kind of stuff and the managers are like, it's gone for them, but maybe they're human beings and they bear grudges too.
Yeah, you'd hope they would. Davy and his troops, they're coming to town. The minute that Welsh Cup was over, we were already talking about when the next league game is. We couldn't wait for it down in Kilkenny because that's 3 times in a row. Up in Kilkenny twice, down in Wexford Park, so it's not kind of a Wexford Park thing or an Nolan Park thing. This is everywhere. Wexford have beaten us the last 3 times. It's not a case of them surprising us with surprise tactics. We know the way they hurl now, and they've still beaten us. So we've been looking forward to this match now, hopefully, and just looking out, the snow is outside, still falling. So hopefully it will go ahead this weekend. But Kilkenny people have been looking forward to this, and there will be a huge crowd, if weather permitting. There will be a huge crowd there. I think there was 10,000 at the Tipperary game last Sunday. It was like kind of a All-Ireland final a few years ago. I don't know where you at the game, Shane, but basically a score was treated with lads jumping up in the stands and cheering. The backs of the stands were full with guys, Kilkenny, Tipperary. The Kilkenny crowd, I suppose, after being so successful for so many years and then not being so successful the last 2 years, the supporters are really hungry for success at the moment. So we can't wait for this game Sunday. And to me, it's a great game for us to get because a few weeks ago we played Waterford, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and finally we seem to get to grips with the sweeper system, where tactically, we have tried. Because when I was there, we were trying to play around with the ball that bit more as opposed to launch it in my last year, but it still didn't seem to come to fruition against the sweeper team, the Wexfords and the Waterfords, say particularly last year. So it was great to beat Waterford down in Welsh Park, playing the game. I presume it was up through the lines. We had a challenge match that morning, so I wasn't at the game. I was just watching on telly. But it looked like they were playing around. They weren't just launching it up long. So Wexford played the very same style as Waterford. So it's going to be a great match for Kilkenny to see where we're at. We know what way they're playing now, so it's time to beat Wexford.
Just on that, Oisín Langan did the post-match interview with Brian Cody after that game and talked to him about so you're playing, it's clearly very different, and there was not talking about that. Just because I'm just going to talk for a minute now and stare you down, and definitely not going to answer the question about how you're definitely playing the ball around a bit more. It was like, no, definitely not doing that. And
Kilkenny apparently never did tactics, even though back in the 2000s they're the team with the deep lying wing forwards. And I actually always wanted to ask Tommy, did it coincide with Mick Dempsey coming in that Kilkenny sort of embraced football-esque wing forwards, whereby they were up and down doing the old graveyard shift constantly? Do you think there was a bit of a Mick Dempsey influence in that?
Listen, we didn't do
he already
tactics.
doesn't want to tell us.
But like, you know, Brian is kind of, you know, sometimes he appears to be a black and white individual. Like, you don't survive since 1999 as a manager of an inter-county team if you do everything black and white or in the traditional way. Brian Cody has always adapted. Like, you go back to the 2000s when we were all following Clare with our physical fitness. That kind of, I suppose, changed with Cork and the running game. Then it changed again with Tipperary and their movement. Then you had the changing up of Galway where everyone kind of changed. A corner forward moved out to the wing. Next play he moved in centre and so on and so forth. And then the sweeper system came along with kind of Clare in 2013. They went on and won 2 All-Irelands again. So Brian Cody has always changed. So, you know, him and his management teams like have always been open to change, and it's always about the future. So Shane, you know, like I don't think, you know, he's always looked at how to win, really.
So you're not going to answer the question.
It was a savage win, and
yeah.
but,
okay, I've had long-held
suspicions. It's a big game for Wexford, though. It's a big game for Wexford because, like, we've seen the progress, Ger. We've seen last year they've I suppose been promoted to Division 1, which are there this year. They got to a Leinster final. This year they've got their wins. They're safe for another year. And what's next for them? Trophies. It's time for Wexford now to move on to the next level under Davy and win trophies. What better way than to win Sunday, because that will mean you will play one of the 3rd or 4th place team in Division 1A in the quarter final of the league. So it's time to win trophies now for Wexford, and you've only a league, Leinster and All-Ireland left. So to me, it's an important game for Wexford Sunday.
It'd be sensational for Hurling if Wexford were to win the league. I think that that would be the best outcome from the scenarios that we have at the moment.
Yeah, you even think of the 60,000 people that showed up at the Leinster final last year against Galway. I think Wexford are a perfect example of a team who could really do with the belief of winning a league title to kind of kick them on the next level. So, you know, they beat Kilkenny for the first time in Nolan Park in 60 years last year. Beat them in the championship for the first time in a long time, since 2004. So I think this would set them up nicely.
Might just get a quick word in before we wrap on Galway Limerick, of course, which is a de facto 1B promotion playoff. We've kind of discussed it on the show before that promotion clearly isn't that important for Galway after what happened last year. But for a team like Limerick, Tommy, who've been stuck in 1B for 8 years at this point consecutively, this is actually a huge game for them, weather permitting, of course, again, if they win at the weekend. That's a big step for this young Limerick side.
It is on. It's a massive game. And I'd even say it's a big game for Galway because, like, you're looking at the All-Ireland champions. Like, I'm just trying, like, I don't know nothing about Galway this year because they haven't been on television, any TV games. They haven't been, you know, in the media that much because no one's really noticing them at the moment. The same kind of with Limerick. Because, like, if you're the All-Ireland champions, what do you want to do? You want to be playing in the big games versus the best players. And they haven't been doing that. So it's a massive game for Galway, I think, as well. But Limerick on. I think, as regards young teams coming with promise that we don't know a whole lot about, I think this is the most exciting Limerick team we've seen in a good number of years. Like, we seen them last year. I was so impressed. I suppose I love the traditional centre-back, the guy that catches balls and clears them all day long. Kyle Hayes, like, I can't wait to see him this year. Like, he was a brilliant player for Limerick last year in the under-21. Now again, because they're in Division 1A, I don't know how he's going this year, or haven't heard or seen much about him. You have their free taker Galan. I think you mentioned him earlier on. Like, all great, say, championship teams have brilliant free takers. Like, the day is gone, I suppose, when in the early 2000s, probably 90s, if you're a 7 out of 10 free taker, you're a brilliant free taker. Now, with the way the ball is and the time that's put into, I suppose, the game now, a 9 out of 10 free taker is nearly what you need now. And Galan seems to be that guy. Like, I always thought the best teams, the free taker mightn't be playing well. You look at his name after the game is over: 1-7, 1-9, 2-5, and you mightn't have even noticed them much in the game. And with Galan, Limerick have a player like that now. So to me, Owen, they're down in Division 1A for too long. It's time for them to get up, hurling with the top 6 counties in Ireland, and I suppose really drive on.
It'd be kind of ironic if they did actually get promoted this time. Like, they've been down there for years, without their Napirsig players, and also with a lot of guys away with colleges throughout the season. I spoke with Neil McManus, the Antrim star man there during the week, and he's played against both Galway and Limerick this year, and he just says that the aggression coming out of Limerick at the moment, he'd kind of go along with them. And you know, Galway have been flying under the radar, and what better way than wearing camouflage? Yeah. So I think it's for Galway, they probably need a couple of tests at this point, because it's all well and good saying we'll fly under the radar, but they probably don't know where they're at the moment, because they're playing against teams that they haven't need to be anywhere near their best, and they're still winning. So I think, you know, they could get a land pretty soon if they end up in a league semi-final and they're just not
ready for it. Yeah. What do you make of the camouflage, Tommy?
Yeah, well, sure, it's like the winners write the history, Ger. This time last year, we were all saying you'll win nothing hurling away in Division 1A down in that second division. Now, because Galway went on and won the All-Ireland, suddenly we're talking about that's the place to be. You know, you're better off nearly being relegated, as Shane said, to come in under the radar, being camouflaged.
Listen, you meant their jerseys, though. The actual, I don't know if you've seen their away jersey. The change of jersey is actual proper camouflage.
Sorry, yeah, they're beautiful, but they're like the white boots. You'd want to be hurling well in them. I don't think our fathers or grandfathers would be too happy if you're not hurling well and you're wearing camouflage jerseys or white boots.
No, it's very Kardashian. Here, I got to ask you, so beside the Hurling Warriors poster, what's the other thing over your right shoulder?
Yeah, so I put that up. Can you see that clearly?
Just a bit, yeah. There's a headline there. It all began with a Brown and Nolan medal.
Yeah. I'll try and bring over the phone to it, see does it work.
Oh, yeah. So what is it?
Can you see that now?
Yeah, definitely.
So that's my... I put it up there, you know, you might notice it or might not, but you did, so it's great. That's my grandfather, Paddy Grace, the man with the cap and the hurls and the suit. So he played for Kilkenny for many years, and he was the secretary for the county board for many years, but just a hurling man. Like, he talked about me that I love hurling. This man loved hurling 100 times more than I did. He was the man in Nolan Park that he wanted all the kids to be let out in the field, because he said they're the future. And he would never let anyone hunt the kids off the field. And who's he shaking hands with? The greatest of them all, Christy Ring. So that's a brilliant, brilliant photo. And what I loved about that is we're talking about elitism at the moment. And I know that the new GA president was talking about the development squads, and we have to move away from elitism. We're the GA, we're about the community. Look, there you have two great men, and look at the young fellas looking up at them. This is an All-Ireland final, the 1954 All-Ireland final. Cork were after beating Kilkenny, and the young lads there in shaking hands with Christy Ray. Look at the crowds that are at the match. Like, to me, that's the GA. That's what we're all about. So I said I'd put that up there. One of you might know us, and then we could talk about it. But it's you know, we have to stay away from elitism. The GA is about the community where everyone is involved. So it's inter-county, it's club, it's everyone. It's a kind of a 50-50 kind of a thing. So I just said I'd put that up there for that.
Yeah, and like unbelievable sportsmanship too from your grandfather, who's obviously lost and is devastated by the loss, but still goes over to shake the hand of Christy Ring.
Yeah, but sure, that's the way hurling is, and that's the way it always has been. Like, you know, you're devastated, you're down in the dumps, but you go over and you say, listen, that's the way you're trying to teach the kids, and that's the way you were taught by your own parents and coaches. You shake their hands and say, listen, I did everything I could. I might have hated you for that 60 minutes, that 70 minutes on the field, and for the few minutes beforehand. But it's over now. We're both hurling men. We all come from clubs. We all come from hurling families, and we're all the one. So it's, you know, it's nearly kind of it's a relief even to shake a hand after getting bet, because at least you can just say, listen, we did our best and we weren't good enough. Let's move on, you know, and you can kind of, you can let it go. But no, it's a beautiful thing in the GA, and you know, that's a great photo.
Oh, it's an amazing photo, and it's a great one to have. Tommy, enjoy the snow day. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks lads. Bye-bye.
Tommy Walsh, brilliant as ever with us this morning. Before we let you go, you've been in Antrim. You mentioned there that you were talking to some Antrim hurlers during the week. You were talking to a bunch of them, Shane McNaughton in particular.
Yeah, so he's got a fantastic story. He hurled for Antrim for years. He was part of that team that had a great win over Dublin in 2010, I think it was, at Croke Park.
Dublin as well, yeah.
Yeah. And he's decided to become an actor. So he applied for the Stella Adler Acting School in New York, and thousands of people apply to that every year, and he got in. Like, he's a like he seems like he's going to go far in it. He had a role in the fall. Actually, I think the scene was deleted for a finish, so he was a bit he was a bit torn up by it. Maybe he's not that good, but he just has a great, interesting story. And his club Cushendall, like he's Sambo McNaughton, like the greatest Antrim player of all time, who played for the county from the age of 16 to 34, and would love to still be hurling as well. I got a little piece with him that will probably play just before the championship as well. So Shane has just decided, you know, in the GA world or in Irish society, it's very hard to stick your head above the parapet and say, I'm going to become an actor, because people are like, well, who do you think you are?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just a great little story, and I wish him best with the acting.
And we have a little clip here of a teaser for the doc to come.
Shane McNaughton. I am an actor from Cushendall in County Antrim.
Explain your first ever audition, both how you felt and also what you were doing.
First audition, it was in Queen's Student Union. I remember pressing the elevator button to go up to the 4th floor to do the audition, and I was in the elevator, and I was just going to get out and leave again. I can remember thinking about it now, it gives me anxiety. But I mean, after that's one lesson I have learned. Just getting outside your comfort zone and things like that it's something I really enjoy now. But then at that time, that was a big step, you know.
Is there any role in the history of film that you wish you could play?
I wish I could play.
Or could have played?
Or could have played. Taxi Driver, Robert De Niro. I love to shave my head, that's why.
So club is where it all started for you, and possibly your best day playing for the club, biggest day perhaps, was your last competitive game of hurling. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, the All-Ireland final. I mean, that was our dream since we were about that height, to play in Croke Park. I remember running about Cushendall hurling pitch pretending I was playing in an All-Ireland final. But to do that with my brother was playing, my dad was part of the coaching. You know, he coached us. My best friends were playing, Niels, McManus and that. You know, to do that was just very special.
Yeah, it's a beautiful part of the world. It really is. It's amazing.
And I get Shane to do a monologue to the camera as well. I got him to do it a couple of times. Once in a graveyard overlooking the water, and another time just where that ruin of that tower was as well. And I think it looks pretty cool. And yeah, he's a good fella.
What part of the county is Cushendall in? Because it looks amazing.
North Antrim. Always a 3-hour drive from Dublin. So
yeah, that's as far as you can go. It's worth spending a week up there and going Ballycastle, Cushendall, Carrickreed, Ropebridge, the Giant's Causeway.
Definitely, that's like a tourism ad right there.
Yeah, all the tourist shit that you see is totally 100%. It doesn't do justice to it. And as a Game of Thrones fan, you definitely love it too. We're going to talk to Joey Carberry in a minute. We're going to hear from Keith Wood as well. A couple of quick Digger, how you doing, Digger? How did Kilkenny ever win a match? The players would only have wanted to drink pints with Tommy Walsh every night and listen to him talk. It's amazing. Asked Tommy about his thoughts on Porrick playing full back. Well, we heard those. I think, like, Porrick is now one of the most important members of that team. It's experience, it's athleticism, it's hurling ability. It's like, clearly you won the trust of the manager when he's sticking you in full back.
Even last year when they lost that Leinster semi-final, Porrick had been injured for 6 weeks and he came back into the team. But because of that full-back position being so isolated and so tough, they decided to throw him in centre forward. And he ended up, I think, hitting 3 wides. He obviously was a bit rusty and he was taken off. But that just shows how tough it is and how important he is, that there was such a knock-on effect from it.